Valdez traffic, over.
Yeah, at the present time, I'm going to alter my course to 200 and reduce speed about 12 knots to wend my way through the ice and...
Prince William Sound, Alaska. Good Friday, March 24th, 1989. The oil tanker Exxon Valdez ran aground on Bly Reef.
Valdez traffic, Exxon Valdez, over.
Time Valdez, Valdez traffic.
Yeah, it's Valdez back. We should be on the radar there. We've fetched up hard ground north of Goose Island off Bly Reef. And evidently leaking some oil. And,
Millions of gallons of crude oil spilled into the rich marine environment of Prince William Sound and onto the shores of the Chugach National Forest. Prince William Sound lies in the heart of the Chugach National Forest, the northernmost forest in the United States. It is a 6 million acre jewel of pristine waters, glistening glaciers, spruce-clad islands, and rocky mainland shores. Located in south-central Alaska, the Chugach Forest encircles Prince William Sound, 100 miles north to south, 230 miles east to west, an area untrammeled by humans. It is managed as part of the National Forest System for many uses, including wilderness values, recreation, fish and wildlife habitat, and timber and other resource development. The Chugach is a very special forest, as diverse as it is vast. It encompasses the rugged mountains of the Kenai Peninsula, the Copper River Delta wetlands, home to millions of shorebirds and waterfowl, and more than 3,000 miles of coastline in Prince William Sound. Visitors to the forest come from all 50 states and more than 60 nations. They seek and find spiritual renewal in this majestic land through activities such as boating, fishing, and exploring the many remote bays, islands, and glaciers of the forest. The Forest Service also manages these lands to protect and maintain fish and wildlife habitat. 5 species of Pacific salmon return from their ocean voyages to spawn in the rivers and streams on the Chugach. Black and brown bear, Sitka black-tailed deer, and bald eagles thrive in this rich land along with many other species of birds and marine mammals. Abundant wildlife and majestic beauty have attracted people to Prince William Sound for centuries. Among its earliest inhabitants were an Eskimo people who came to be known as the Chugach. They explored new territory in their small, swift kayaks, drawn by ocean currents to the islands of the Sound. Russian voyagers were lured by the rich fur trade in seal and otter pelts. They were followed by English and Spanish explorers, searching for a northwest passage. Later, loggers, gold seekers, and fox farmers came in turn to reap the benefits of the land. Today, commercial and sport fishing boats, cruise ships, and the giant oil tankers ply the waters of the Sound. It was one of these oil tankers, the Exxon Valdez, that spilled 11 million gallons of crude oil into the pristine waters of Prince William Sound. As the tanker sailed outside the normal shipping lane, it struck Bligh Reef. 11 of the vessel's 17 cargo tanks were ripped open. During the first 3 hours, nearly 6 million gallons of crude oil were spread over an area 10 miles wide. Eventually, more than 10 million gallons leaked, making this the worst spill in North American history. It soon became apparent the oil would reach national forest lands in the Sound. Forest Service personnel, working with other federal and state agencies on the regional response team, began reacting to the crisis. The city of Valdez, terminus for the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline and port for the tankers, quickly drew worldwide attention as oil cleanup coordination began. The population of Valdez, normally about 4,000, swelled as workers, experts, and media came from around the world to observe and participate in events. Resource specialists, wildlife and fisheries biologists and archaeologists immediately responded to the emergency. They began by identifying critical habitat areas and cultural sites to be protected. Local fishermen went into action, spreading booms to protect sensitive bays, streams, and fish hatcheries from oil contamination. Forest Service District Ranger John Knorr coordinated with Exxon, the Coast Guard, and the state of Alaska during the development and implementation of a cleanup plan.
It was early on in the oil spill incident that we were called, because it is national forest land and immediate needs for locating radio systems. Refueling sites were important in this very remote part of Prince William Sound. And so we were called very quickly to help expedite necessary permits and approvals for the use of public land for this incident.
The Forest Service continually reviewed and issued permits for many uses of national forest lands, such as the deployment of emergency satellite communications systems.
We became one of many interdisciplinary players, if you will, very many different specialties of scientists, biologists, archaeologists, weather specialists, a whole host of different professional people were brought to bear to try to logistically support the cleanup so that no additional adverse effects would occur as a result of cleaning up the oil.
The uncontained oil spread widely, affecting many popular recreation areas and leaving dead and heavily oiled shorebirds, otters, and other wildlife in its wake.
One of our research divisions, and
Dean Davidson, a soil scientist, flew to Green Island to observe early effects of the oil pollution on the ecosystem of the island.
During that trip then, we took a helicopter and we flew out over Eleanor, Naked Islands, northern end of Knight Island, areas that had been reported to have been affected by the oil spill. And then we went on to Green Island and Montague Island and some of the other smaller places there. And what we found when we were on the island was an area or a strip around the shoreline that ranged from anywhere from 50 to 75 feet wide that had been covered with this kind of a thick, black, oily film, anywhere from 25 to 75% of the entire area, or at least over that much of the area.
Exxon hired an army of workers to begin cleanup of beaches and shorelines.
And that involves up to 5,000 people, a number of large vessels, and hundreds of smaller fishing vessels, other motorboats that will be in a supporting role, supporting these thousands of people that will be cleaning up in the area of Knight Island, Eleanor Island, all of the areas in the center part of Prince William Sound that saw the oil in March.
A variety of cleanup methods were used on the shoreline. While booms and skimmer ships were used on the water. However, much of the oil escaped and fouled the coastline in many areas as it moved along the southern coast of Alaska, eventually impacting more than 700 miles. Archaeologist John Matson assisted in developing measures to protect any significant historic or prehistoric sites on the Chugach National Forest.
But I'm convinced that at one time the Chugach Eskimo that now occupy Prince William Sound, or parts of it, and the Eyak Indian community, which is actually on the fringe of Prince William Sound and originally extended to the eastward along the coast, both had a very rich cultural heritage. But because of the inclement climatic conditions that we have here and the lack of scientific exploration and collecting in the area by museums and ethnographers in the early days, few of their artifacts and cultural items, artwork, have come down to us to recent day. And some of the things that may be discovered in these caves and rock shelters out there may raise our inventory and appreciation of the native culture out there beyond what we appreciate today.
Many people were needed to assist the management of shoreline cleanup. Biologist Donnelly Hill came to the Chugach from North Carolina to lend his expertise.
I work primarily off the Tongass Ranger and the Ocean Ranger boats, part of a RAT team, Resource Advisory Team. Our primary mission is to advise on methods that will allow for the most environmentally sound restoration of the affected shoreline areas. In addition to occasional inspections of areas that are planned for cleanup so that we can advise on any special precautions necessary relative to salmon streams or whether or not contaminated fucus, popweed, rockweed, the vegetation in the intertidal area should be removed. Any special precautions that are necessary.
The Tongass Ranger, a 32-foot working vessel commissioned in 1959 for use in southeast Alaska, made its first crossing of the Gulf of Alaska to serve as a floating home for Forest Service inspectors. As the operation gained momentum, public affairs officers tracked and reported the location and direction of the oil slick and the progress of boom deployment. They also assured the public that vast areas of the Sound were unaffected and still available for recreation.
We'll be trying to provide updated information on a regular basis to our offices in Anchorage, in our 3 district offices at Seward, Girdwood, and Cordova, and Valdez, where we'll be until the oil is totally cleaned up from the shoreline. Much of Prince William Sound from the Whittier side and from Cordova, the nearest those communities, people will still continue to enjoy the benefits of the shoreline and the upland forest environment that they have before the spill occurred. So those areas are still as they were, and we want people to understand that there's still a lot of these areas within reach of those 2 communities that were as they were prior to March 24th.
Effects of this tragedy could take many years to measure and evaluate. Forest Service personnel and other scientists from state and federal agencies are designing studies covering a range of resources. Some of these studies may take years.
Well, in my opinion, the more dramatic effects of the oil spill that have been observed may very well prove to be the least that we will finally observe. I think that so much of the productivity of Prince William Sound is tied up in the intertidal zones, and so many of these intertidal zones have been so badly damaged. I think you'll begin to see subtle secondary impacts in terms of the ability of the system to sustain the level of production of fish and marine mammals that it ordinarily could. So I think rather than a direct mortality effect, we may begin to see the effect of a loss of productivity associated with damage to these intertidal areas.
The Exxon Valdez oil spill was a tragic event in this resource-rich area of Alaska. Coastal wildlife populations were hard hit by the spill. Thousands of birds, otters, fish, and crustaceans were killed, and many more may continue to be affected in the months and years to come. Despite the magnitude of the spill, tourists and others traveling in the Sound on state ferries or cruise ships may not see impacts of the oil apart from the flurry of boats or a faraway glimpse of workers cleaning ashore. Charter operators and tour companies are still welcoming guests to their favorite spots for wildlife viewing.
We take people to Columbia Glacier and other trips throughout the Sound. And right now we're here at Grower Island Camp overlooking Columbia Glacier. This area here was not affected by the oil spill. Today we have been out to look at the bad damage of the oil spill, but a good part of Prince William Sound is free from the oil, and it's still a great, beautiful place to visit. And you should never cancel a trip from the negative that you heard, because the Sound has still got a lot of pretty area to come to and see.
The Chugach National Forest still holds attraction for Alaskans and visitors from afar. For those venturing into Prince William Sound, Forest Service cabins are available to use as stopping-off places throughout much of the year. Your Forest Service is working hard to ensure that the Chugach National Forest, Prince William Sound, and other national forest lands retain their recreation, wilderness, and resource values for future generations to use and enjoy.